Hi, guys, and welcome to the final events leading to the American Civil War. What we've provided here for you today is a chronological rendering of the events of the 1850s, and these are the final two major events that led to the secession of the South and the Civil War. The first thing is understanding the politicians who were created during this time. The main politician of the 1850, the guy who replaced the Calhouns, the Websters, and the Clays, was Stephen Douglas, known as the Little Giant. He was from the great state of Illinois. And curiously enough, an unknown politician that very few people had heard of, Abraham Lincoln, was also from the great state of Illinois. Lincoln was a typical politician of the Whig Party in the 1850s. He was elected to Congress as a Whig in the early 1850s. He lost re-election and then joined the newly formed Republican Party in 1854 after the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Now, what's really important about this, guys, is the Republican Party's platform was for preventing the extension of slavery, i.e., they did not want slavery to expand to the West. They cobbled together the old Whigs, the Free Soilers, and that was their new platform. The Southerners interpret this as abolitionism. Lincoln never once advocated during his elections for the abolition of slavery. He doesn't actually abolish slavery until during the Civil War. Lincoln and Douglas ran for Senate from the great state of Illinois in 1858. During this time, Lincoln gave his very famous House Divided speech, in which he said, "This country cannot permanently endure half free and half slave." This alarmed Southerners. However, Douglas was forced by Lincoln, who was a master debater, to issue the Freeport Doctrine, in which Douglas said that slavery could not exist where the laws of the local government would not support us. And this also alarmed Southerners during these debates. The key result of these debates is it made Lincoln a household name around the country. And even though Lincoln lost this election to Douglas, he lost the battle, but he will ultimately win the war, which will be the election of 1860. In between these two major events is a major event known as John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. Harper's Ferry is in a tiny corner between three states, Virginia, Maryland, and today West Virginia. There was no West Virginia at that time. And John Brown is the opposite of William Lloyd Garrison. He is an abolitionist like William Lloyd Garrison, but whereas William Lloyd Garrison was a pacifist, John Brown believed that slavery had to end in a sea of blood. He was not afraid to fight for the end of slavery. He took an armory in Harper's Ferry, Virginia. He was hoping that he and his followers would be overwhelmed with slaves that would come flocking to him, and he was going to march through the South with his slave army and put an end once and for all to slavery. He never made it out of that little fort down there, which is called John Brown's Fort, which is still in Harper's Ferry today. By the way, if you take a left at the fort and walk up the hill, some of the best ice cream you'll ever have, but that's a side note. And this gentleman over here on the right is a very young-looking Robert E. Lee. You will see what 4 years of war does to him. He actually captured John Brown. John Brown was put on trial. John Brown became a hero during this time period. During his trial, he was a very tall man, and he had a very strong voice. And he said, "The crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood." And he was correct. As you can see here, he's being led off to his execution. He was held up as a martyr to African Americans. As you can see, he's kissing the little black baby there. And the Virginians who hung him look on very suspiciously. Union Army would march into the Civil War battles to a song called "John Brown's Body Lies a Moldering in the Grave." He becomes a huge martyr and symbol of what it will take to abolish slavery in this country. He becomes also a huge symbol of the division in this country. This mural is on the Kansas State Capitol. It is my favorite image in American history. Gun in one hand, a Bible in the other. He looks like and sounded like Moses the prophet from the Bible. He is spreading his arms, and instead of separating the Red Sea, he is separating the country between Union and Confederates. You see the many dead soldiers lying on the ground, his prediction that the country would be awash in a sea of blood. Over here is Frederick Douglass, the most famous abolitionist, escaped slave. And in the background, you can see the tornado representing from where John Brown came, Kansas, the tornadoes of Kansas. Think of the Wizard of Oz. This is a great allusion to the history that was represented by John Brown. So this finally leads us to the election of 1860. This election is one of the most interesting elections in American history. Douglass went to the South, to Baltimore, to earn the Democratic nomination. The Democratic Party was the only national party in 1860. The Southern delegation walked out. They went to another place in Baltimore and nominated a Southern Democrat, Mr. Breckinridge. Douglass was nominated as a Northern Democrat. Lincoln easily won the Republican nomination, which was held in Chicago in the great state of Illinois that year. And then finally, in a hope to preserve the Union, a fourth party was formed, the Constitutional Union Party by John Bell, which was hoping to hold the Union together. The fact of the matter is the population of the North was so large at this time that Lincoln did not need Southern votes to win the election. And in fact, Lincoln was not even on the ballot. Imagine this. Lincoln was not on the ballot in 11 Southern states. You could not vote for Abraham Lincoln, the Republican, in this election. But as you can see, he comfortably won the majority of electoral votes, even though he only won 40% of the popular vote, making him a minority president. That leads to this amazing cartoon that you might see, where Lincoln and Douglass are tearing and fighting over the North. John Breckinridge is just tearing off the South from the entire map of the United States. And poor John Bell over there has his little jar of glue, and he's furiously trying to glue the Union back together, which we know will not happen. Once Lincoln was elected, the South had already threatened to secede if the Republican was elected. Again, Lincoln never called for the abolition of slavery, just not the extension of slavery. However, the South saw him as an abolitionist, and on December 20th, 1860, South Carolina becomes the first state to secede from the Union. Remember, they are the state that threatened to secede during the Tariff of Abominations. And as you can see from the map, the Deep South, 7 states in the Deep South, formed the Confederacy of the United States before February of that year. This is before Abraham Lincoln is even inaugurated as President of the United States. And then 4 more states will follow after the firing on Fort Sumter in April, which is just after Lincoln was inaugurated. Back then, presidents were not inaugurated until the 3rd week of March. And this ultimately, obviously, is going to lead to the American Civil War, which we will talk about next week. Thanks, guys.